Hello everyone, and welcome to our complimentary webinar today. We are excited to have you with us, and thank you again for registering. We will have time for a Q&A session after the presentation, so be sure to submit your questions in the chat box provided. Now, let me introduce Oscar Combs. Oscar Combs is a senior consultant of the ISO 9001 group. Oscar has over 22 years of experience providing consulting, auditing, and training to organizations such as Transocean, Hewlett-Packard, Kawasaki, Cameron, Halliburton, and numerous other medium and small organizations throughout the United States and abroad. Oscar is an exemplar certified lead auditor and a principal management consultant. Now everyone, let's welcome Oscar and begin our presentation today.
Thank you, Priscilla, for that great intro. Welcome to our complimentary webinar today in regards to how organizations manage change. This is a very important topic for many organizations. Before we get started, I want to kind of briefly tell you a little bit about our company, the ISO 9001 Group. You know, we are a consulting, auditing, and training company based in Houston. You know, our mission is to help companies improve operations and reduce risk through their management systems. You know, that's what a management system is all about, helping your organization improve its operations and reduce its risk. Our consultants have an average of 25 years of experience, and so we actually have worked in many industries, implemented quality systems from the ground up, and so we understand what our clients are going through. Our consultants have an average of 25 years of experience as well. And we are very proud of our A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau. We've earned that, and we're very proud of it. Something that I want you to think about, and I would like for you to do, either before we get off or as soon as we get off, you go to our social media, like and follow us. You know, you can qualify to receive a $10 Amazon gift card. We do random drawings. You'll find us at the ISO 9001 Group on any of these social media sites. Once we get to the end of this presentation, we'll have a question and answer session. Now, even during the webinar, I would encourage you to enter any of your questions into the chat window. We will be monitoring these questions, and we will be answering those questions once we get it to the Q&A session. So make sure you stay logged on to the very end of the webinar so that you can hear the answers to these questions, okay? So stay on. We're going to only be on for about 30 minutes or so. So again, like I say, we appreciate you joining. So let's jump into today's presentation. So one of the main topic that we're talking about is how organizations manage change. You know, change happens very quickly in companies and very frequently as well. And so I thought it would be important to let's define the definition. The act or instance of making or becoming different. So change is the act or the instance of making something different. This could be a process in your organization, the act of. This could be someone, you know, making a procedural change, changing a supplier, people, personnel changing, so forth, right? Maybe changing the scope of work, you know, on a project. Many things that involve changes in organizations. But so at least we have a really good definition. Now, let's face it, nobody likes change, right? We always say that people are resistant to change. Yes, people are resistant to change. It begins when we come out of the womb, where everybody's nice and comfortable, and boom, welcome to the world. and pretty much everyone on this call came out looking just like this. And that was your first introduction of change. And no one likes it. Everyone gets kind of set in their ways. People don't really want to follow a formal change process. They'd rather just make the change. It'd be a lot easier. But we have to realize that when we make changes in organizations that we're impacting other things. But the first thing to realize is that, hey, no one likes change. And it happens quite often. So today I want to talk to you about 7 steps to help you manage change within your organization. Okay? The first thing we have to do is recognize that there's a need for change, right? Is there a need for change? Let's look at our processes proactively and determine, is there a need to change anything? And then 2, we need to recognize change before the change occurs. You know, many times in organizations, you don't even realize that change has occurred. We didn't recognize it, but someone over here has changed something. Someone over here has decided that they don't need this. Someone has added a supplier that we already have suppliers for. Sales department has changed the sales process. So sometimes we don't even notice it until something good or bad happens. And then that's when we realize, oh, hey, something changed. You guys may know this book, Who Moved My Cheese, right? That's what that's all about, is when someone moved the cheese and the rat in this example would always come back to the same spot and wouldn't notice anything had changed until the cheese was moved. And then step 3, justifying the change. You know, as many times people just want to change things for change's sake. And sometimes there's no need for change. And sometimes when we slow down and we force people to think about the change and explain it and justify the need for the change, sometimes we actually realize that, hey, we don't need to change. We just need that person to follow the current process. Or we can revise the existing process. Step 4 is that after we have justified the change, we need to define the required resources to implement the change. You know, do we need more personnel? Do we need more equipment, resources to make sure that the change can be implemented? And then in step 5, we need to consider the risk and the impacts of the change. You know, it's a cause and effect. Every time you change something, there's an effect on the other end. We may not see it or realize that we are impacting someone else because primarily we are focused on trying to improve our process or step in the process, and we neglect to think about the ripple effect that we could be having on others within the organization. And then 6, changes should be approved before they are implemented. I know you guys know what I'm talking about here, where people in your organization may just be making changes and these changes have not been approved. No one approved this new process or procedure that someone is trying to implement. No one approved this new supplier and so forth, right? So before we implement change or change things, they must be approved. And 7, once a change is approved, then we need to communicate it and then we need to implement it. All right, so we're going to talk about these things in a little more depth here right now. All right, let's talk about recognizing the need for change. Now, I'm sure every one of you guys have seen this image all on social media, all on the news, CNN, ABC, every major news outlet has had some type of report on the incident that occurred on United Airlines on April the 9th. We must realize that we need to recognize the need for change before a positive or negative impact. You know, change is good, but it can also be bad. and change can have either a positive or negative impact. And so on April the 9th, United had an incident where a flight was overbooked. Now, this is common practice in the airline industry to overbook flights. And when we talk about recognizing the need for change, if we look at this one process of commonly overbooking and purposely overbooking flights, we understand that there's a scenario where there's not going to be enough seats for passengers and crew members. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure this out. It's pretty obvious that this issue was brewing. All right, so this incident came to head on April the 9th, where United needed to get their crew to their next location so that they can execute the next flight, and they needed seats. And so United offered passengers an $800 voucher, which is not bad actually, because $800 gets you a nice hotel, and you can have steak and shrimps, and some of you guys probably like nice fancy wines and all of that. So $800 actually goes a long way, but sometimes $800 is not worth giving up your time or where you're trying to go. United must realize that people book flights, in accordance with where they're trying to be and when they're trying to be there. And so this $800 is of little value at this point. And so when no one opted to select or take this $800 voucher, United randomly selected passengers to be removed. So think about it. You're sitting on the plane with your headphones in, you got everything going, you're settled in. Someone comes and say, hey, you need to get off the plane. And so this one gentleman here was selected. He did not want to get off, so United forcefully removed the passenger. And they basically drug him off the plane, as we can see in this picture. Now, United experienced a major crisis from this because, hey, everybody has a video camera now on their phone. And so the next, within hours, this incident was all over social media. I saw it before it appeared on major news networks. And so this is a major incident for the company, United Airlines, but it's something that they should have recognized the need for this change before this incident. And so within your organizations, you have to recognize the need for change. There's things going on in your company right now that that there's opportunity for major problems. These issues may be minor, they may be major potential impacts, but you know that they're there. The organization knows that they're there, but no one is taking out the time to recognize the need for the change. So United, when they had this incident, they recognized the need for change. 2 days later, on April the 11th, their stock value decreased by $255 million, okay, in 2 days. Now, that woke them up, but it shouldn't have taken all of this to wake them up to recognize the need for change. This is what we're talking about. Why do we want to be reactive after a negative impact? The purpose of our quality system is to give us tools to recognize the need for change before the negative impact. All right, so on April the 14th, United then changes their policy of not removing passengers that have already boarded planes. Now, you tell me that they didn't know that this was a process change that needed to take place before April the 9th? After this major incident, after them losing $255 million, You know, as quality professionals, it's our job to, if management is not understanding the risk of the processes or the potential risk of negative impacts, we have to bring it to their attention. So the first step in this process is that we need to recognize the need for changes. So in ISO 9001 in clause 6.1.1.c, it says that organizations should determine the risks and opportunities that need to be addressed to prevent, keyword, prevent, or reduce undesired effect. Now, do you believe that United losing $255 million in their stock was an undesired effect? Do you believe the hit that they took to their image is an undesired effect? Matter of fact, I heard on the news today where United and other airlines have now discontinued the process of overbooking flights. This is a process change that they're making now in the entire industry after being very reactive. As I've indicated, this, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that if you overbook a flight, there's going to be an opportunity when you will not have enough seats. And so we should recognize these things before they have an undesired effect on our companies. All right. So let's step back in time before April the 9th, 2017, and let's just imagine that someone in the United Airlines organization was to be thinking about what could potentially occur if we continue to overbook flights in our flight process, booking the flight process. So the risk is that we will not have enough seats for passengers and crew. What's the probability of this occurring? United had enough data to understand that this was a high probability of occurring because they probably give out these vouchers all the time. It's not the first time that they've overbooked a flight. And then what would be the impact? The potential for conflict aboard the plane when a passenger does not accept the voucher, right? Then that happened. Another impact could be that of public concern, passengers capturing the altercation on their cell phone cameras, posting videos to social media. What's another impact? Potential loss in stock value, lawsuits, poor image. All of these things we could see. They say hindsight is 20/20, but foresight can also be 20/20. We don't have to wait for things bad to occur to recognize the potential for those things or to recognize the potential for these undesired effects. That's what one of the changes with ISO 9001 2015 is about the risk assessment. So do we need change? Yes. The proposed change could have been discontinue the practice of overbooking flights, and United Airlines would have never had this issue. All right, so it's right there. I'm just trying to tie clauses of the standard to real life, and we must realize these quality systems, they are really business management systems, right? So if we follow these standards and tools that we have, they will help us. So the next step was to recognize change before it occurs. This means before employees start doing things outside of approved processes and procedures, we should recognize that change before that happens, all right? To do that, management must establish a culture of compliance. So what's a culture of compliance? Culture of compliance is where every employee from the very top to the bottom, everyone in that organization understands the importance, they're disciplined, they're committed, they're accountable to follow established and approved processes within the organization without deviation. And if change is necessary or if deviation is necessary, we're going to get approval for that change. We're going to get approval for the deviation before we do it. we got to realize that many processes and procedures are in place within organizations to prevent things. Many times organizations put processes in place after they've experienced a negative or undesired effect, and then they put a process and a procedure in place. So sometimes, employees may not understand the reason why a certain step is necessary or the reason why this process is necessary. And they may deviate or want to change it without getting approval. And when they do that, they are reintroducing that risk that process or procedure was meant to protect the organization from. So any unmanaged change is bad. It doesn't matter if the impact of the change is good, but if the change is unmanaged, it will be bad. So someone could be making a change. For example, a buyer may want to use an unapproved vendor because maybe this vendor is less expensive. Now everyone would see that change as being good, but what if this supplier has not been evaluated properly, and this supplier introduces issues in regards to they're not able to meet on-time demands for your organization, right? So the negative impact is that now you may be late on your orders. Now, is that going to be worth that, reduction in price? All right. What about sales, offering additional discounts? A salesperson may be so eager to get a sale, they'll offer an additional discount. Is that going to have a negative effect on the organization? Yes. But the change of getting the sale would be perceived as being good. A project manager implementing a new step in the process, maybe something the project manager may feel is necessary. But that new step may have a ripple effect on something else that's in place. And so it's not a matter of change if the impact is good. It's about making sure that all change is managed properly, and any unmanaged change will be bad for your organization. So changes should be requested. The impacts of those changes should be assessed and then approved, keyword, before the change is implemented. Then we need to justify change. Change should be justified. Many times people want to change things and it's not really necessary. All right. When we force people to think about it and explain their rationale for the change, many times they say, hey, the change is not necessary. It's just a matter of slowing down, guys. That's how we manage change. We have to slow down and manage the change properly. So we need to think, assess the impact, and then we can change. Then we need to define the resources for the changes. So if we make changes, we need to realize that there may be additional resources required to effectively implement that change. Good changes can have negative impacts if the resources are not defined. So United made a really good change, but they made a major change like that within 5 days of that incident. Crew can no longer displace passengers that have already boarded flights of United. So even though this is a good change for the company and for us as passengers and for the industry, if it's unmanaged, it could have a negative effect on United, even though the change is good. So what's going to happen the next time that a United flight is fully booked and the crew needs to make their next flight? What's going to happen when that occurs again? So will United now need to have backup crews in place? Will they need to have additional flights? Will they need to figure out solutions to, if they have to displace a passenger, can they figure out a solution where the passenger can still get to their destination on time? Have they factored in how much money or time that this change that they made within 5 days is going to require? Will it be less than $255 million? All of the resources that they need, will it be less than $255 million? Sometimes people make decisions based upon that. They understand the potential loss, but will it outweigh the positive, or will the positive outweigh the loss? So they do a bit of a cost-benefit analysis. So in your organizations, when you're making change, you have to keep in mind that we need to define what resources will you need to effectively implement those changes. And we must realize that every action has a reaction. I mean, it's the theory of cause and effect. Whatever you do is impacting someone else. It could be a small ripple effect. It could be something that you notice immediately, or it could be something that you don't notice for many years to come, or months, or days, or whatever. But we have to realize that every time we change something, there will be an effect. So to help us determine what those effects will be proactively before we implement the change, this is why we want to do what we call a risk and impact assessment. So let's just look at these couple scenarios here. Where sales is providing the additional discount, what is the risk? Well, of course, that project is going to be less profitable. What is the impact? It's going to reduce the profitability for the company. And if that is done, that means that the company cannot afford its expenses, therefore layoffs and things of this nature. Companies shutting down, right? But sometimes the salesperson is not thinking that far. They're just thinking of that one sale or sales that they're trying to make, but they're not thinking about the whole profitability of the organization. How can we mitigate it? See, now if we are doing all of this before the change, we have recognized this potential undesired effect before the change, and now we can put things in place that will help mitigate the negative impact that the change could have. So it's not that it's bad that the salesperson is trying to make a sale by offering an additional discount, but if it's not managed properly or mitigated, it will have a negative impact. So how can we ensure or reduce the likelihood that we'll have a negative impact? So the salesperson could look for opportunities to upsell or sell additional services to make up the difference on the discount that was given. So let's talk about the buyer, maybe a buyer using an unapproved supplier. These are real scenarios that's happening in your organizations right now. Some of you guys may be having these exact problems in your company right now, that's going on right now, and the organization has not considered the risk and the impacts of the changes. We may have here in the buyer using an unapproved supplier. Supplier is not able to meet on-time delivery demands. Could be a risk. And then the impact that would cause the company not to be able to meet its on-time delivery. And so their orders will now be delayed. Their customers will now be dissatisfied. How can we mitigate this? Well, first we can make sure that we are using approved vendors. And so this buyer should be directed. See, this is where we're talking about the culture of compliance. If a buyer is wanting to use an unapproved supplier, that buyer should be redirected immediately to the approved vendors list. So in this instance, this supplier may need to explain the rationale as to why we need this new supplier. Do we already have a supplier that provides the same services on the approved vendors list? If not, well, it's not that we can't use the supplier, but we need to evaluate the supplier first. We just can't deviate or change our process without going through a managing the process or managing the change. Let's talk about United a little bit more. So United no longer are displacing their passengers at aborted flights. So the risk here is that crew members may not be able to make their next assigned flight, which is a major concern. You have other people on the other side in other airports that are waiting for the crew. And so will their flight now be canceled because maybe one person in one city is going to maybe cause a flight of 100 or plus people to be canceled because of this change that United has made in their policy. So what can United do to proactively or mitigate a negative impact due to this change? We talked about some of them. Are they going to now have backup crews? Are they going to establish additional flights? Are they going to partner with other airlines so that passengers that are displaced can still make their destinations? So this is the importance of slowing down and thinking about the risk and the impacts of the changes that you are proposing, and not just jump into making changes and not recognizing that those changes could have a negative impact on your company. And then changes must be approved, and this should be done before the change is made. Yeah, is it quicker to just make a change without going through all this paperwork or processes on how to manage change? Yeah, that's quicker. But at what cost? What impact? So don't be so quick to want to make a change because you feel like you don't have time. I believe that we all would agree that United now wishes they would have thought about this change or the need for change and implemented change properly before this negative event. There's things going on in your organization right now where people are just making changes, deviating from processes, deviating from procedures, but at what cost and what impact? So to help, we need to have a management of change process, a MOC process, where we're going to define the issue. Like what is the issue that you're having right now? Why this change is necessary? Is it causing, what issue is it causing within the organization? What documents, what control documents or procedures are impacted due to this potential or requested or proposed change? And then a person should be made to justify the change. Why is this change necessary? Now that we understand that there is a controlled document, a procedure that's requiring something to be done this way, I need to know why someone feels we don't need it done that way any longer, or why we need to change the established process. And then what resources do we need for this change? Do we need more personnel? Do we need more people? Need more time? And then what risk? And how will we control the risk? Are there any risk associated with this change? What things will we put in place to control the risk associated with this change? And then what impact will this change have on current responsibilities and authorities? Will it now, this change, will it cause us to have an additional position? Will it cause additional responsibilities for a certain department or person or position in the company? Does this person have the authority to execute the change? All these things. And then approval. The change must be approved before it's implemented. These are some of the key things that organizations have issues with. Once the change is approved, then it can be communicated and implemented. You see, we've gone through the whole cycle of the change process, and the last step is communicate and implement. In many organizations, the first step is changing, and then they communicate. Or people don't even recognize the change. And so we got to be disciplined and follow that process. All right, so once changes have been approved, then they must be communicated to the impacted parties. This could be your suppliers. This could be your customers. So let's just say, for example, United has to communicate to their customers, passengers on their flights, all their employees, their management. They got to communicate to everyone. A lot of people that are impacted by their change. So who's impacted by the changes in your company? That's what you have to ask yourself when you're making changes. Who needs to know about this change? It does no good if a change is made. No one knows about it. The right people don't know about it. So how do organizations communicate changes? Policies, processes. Maybe we need a new policy. Maybe we need to revise a policy. Maybe we need a new procedure. Maybe we need to revise one. Maybe we need to do news releases, emails, videos to people, newsletters, memos, contracts. You know, this is how organizations manage change. It cannot be done verbally. You see, I don't have verbal up here. It will not be enough for organizations to implement everlasting change that's going to stand the test of time by only communicating a change verbally. Now, when you communicate a change, or typically when you communicate anything in an organization or anywhere else, you need to do it 3 times via 3 methods, 3 by 3. That means I need to communicate it, maybe an email, maybe a procedure, and a meeting. You know, by the 3rd time, maybe the employee has understood that a change is taking place and they need to adjust their behavior and actions, okay? But you cannot expect for human beings to just change overnight. And you can't expect you to send out one email or a memo and expect the change to take place. There's such a thing called the Kurt-Lewin change model. This is where, you know, people are not light switches. You can't just make a change and they change their behavior. They're not going to be like your CNC machines where you can reprogram them and then the machine is going to operate differently. It's probably a good thing that people are not like that. I really appreciate that people are not like that. But when we're dealing with people, they need to unfreeze their current behavior. And you kind of thaw them out a little bit. Start talking about why we need to change. You know, because we would have done a risk assessment. And now we can explain the potential negative impacts as to why we need to change. You know, we just don't want to dump change on people. That's when people start resisting. But if you're communicating clearly, thawing them out, getting them ready for the change, before the change, that's called the unfreeze process. And then we insert the change. We insert the revised process or the new procedure. We implement that. We start training people on it, right? We issue the new process in our document control process. We implement the change and then we refreeze. Refreeze means now this is the new way of doing business. This is where we start holding people accountable to the new ways. This change has now been approved. It's now been implemented. Now the expectation is that all impacted parties adjust their behaviors and methods to the new way, and the new way becomes the norm. That's called unfreeze change and the refreeze process. And this will help your organization implement lasting change. Okay, well, I've covered everything that I wanted to talk to you about in regards to managing how organizations manage change. I hope that you've been able to gain some benefit from what we've discussed. And at this moment, I'm going to hand it back over to Priscilla to see if we have any questions for me.
Thank you, Oscar. We do have a few questions. The first one is, would this process be applied to small changes?
Will the process be applied to small changes? I definitely understand where this person is going because, you know, some changes we need to make them quickly, right? So I'm going to explain it this way. Think about if you were going to a formal event and a casual event. Now, if you're going to a formal event, like I did when I got married, I had to put on a tux and everything. I got all dolled up, guys. So I went through a whole lot of effort to get dressed, but if I'm just going to a casual event, maybe going to HEB or something, going to the grocery store, I'm not going to put all of that effort in, but I'm still going to follow the process of getting dressed, for example, right? But I may not go through all of the steps or the detail that I went through when I'm going to a formal event. So just like you guys, when you have a major change, you're going to still follow the management of change process, but it won't be as thorough as if you were having a major change within your organization. Do you have any other questions?
Yes, Oscar, do you have any additional information you can provide?
Definitely, we do. This webinar will actually be posted onto our YouTube channel. So you can go to the ISO 9001 group on YouTube. You'll find this video there once we finish it. You can also find a nice article that was written on this topic. Go to our website, ISO9001group.com, to our blog section, and you'll see an article on this as well, which I encourage you to print that article or look at that video on our YouTube channel. Any other questions? I think we've got time for maybe one more.
On an intranet system, do you suggest having folders of old forms and policies, or should there just be folders of updated new policies and procedures and forms?
So if you're posting your processes and procedures, the only thing that should be available is the latest revision, and everything else should be archived. That's the only thing you want people to see is the latest and the greatest. So I would just say anything that you're posting, make sure it represents the latest revision, therefore all the latest changes to processes and procedures.
Okay, Oscar, lastly, does the ISO 9001 group help companies implement change management programs?
Yes, we definitely help organizations implement a formal change management process. We can assist organizations in implementing or recognizing change proactively, not in a way that, after the negative impact, but how to really look at your processes and recognize the need for change and the risk of or the negative impacts that exist in your current processes that you may not see. So we definitely are able to help organizations in this area. You can contact us at our phone number at 832-326-9796, or you can email us info@ISO 9001 group for more information on that. Okay. All right. Any other questions?
No, sir. That concludes the questions.
Okay, Priscilla, we'll hand it back over to you. Thank you.
Thank you again for attending our complimentary webinar. Please feel free to reach out to us at 832-326-9796 or info@ISO9001group.com if you have any additional questions. Also, be sure to like us on LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube to stay up to date on when our next complimentary webinar will be, as well as additional training opportunities. This webinar will be available on our website and YouTube channel for your use. Thank you and have a quality day.